What's your personal Appendix N or personal reading recommendations for RPG tone or design?
Okay, this is by no means exhaustive, and I'm going to leave off some of the more obvious ones. So, where to start? William S. Burroughs, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Sturgeon. Philip K. Dick. Surreality, but in a way that sucks you in, I think. John Brunner. Harlan Ellison. It might have been a cantankerous, argumentative, litigious old bastard, but his ideas were sound and he really pushed the envelope of what science fiction could be about, and addressed difficult topics, especially in the Dangerous Visions collections, which I strongly recommend. Niven and Pournelle, people tend to dismiss them as right-wing these days. I'm not 100% on that. I think they're a bit more socially libertarian than that, but there's no denying that their bodies of work, individually and together, are brilliant and should be read, I think, for anyone who's world building or considering science fiction. China Mayville, a newer author, I guess, certainly very influential on me. Breath of fresh air. Most of his stuff's good, but the later couple of Baslag novels aren't so great. Asimov, he can be dry and dull and boring to an extent, but the ideas are certainly there. It's about the ideas. It's about the social science fiction. Harry Harrison, particularly the Stainless Steel Rat series. If you want to intricately plot heists, or you want to have humour without undercutting the narrative, I think reading Harrison is a good idea. Sean Hudson for grotesque horror. James Herbert for slightly more cerebral and atmospheric horror. Clive Barker, he's an interesting one because he was good until he came out as gay. Then he was less good because he was more at peace with himself, and more power to him. And now his best work is his children's books, which seems weird for a horror author, but there you go. I still think he gives a very British perspective, which can be missing from a lot of influences on role-playing games and writing more broadly. Comics, often more accessible and a bit closer to the kind of combination of visual and textual medium that role-playing games inhabit. So Alan Moore, obviously, Neil Gaiman, Brian Talbot, slightly less obviously, but he is an auteur. He writes and draws his comics, so you see a sort of unity of vision that matches a lot of independent creators in the RPG space, a lot of the time. Grant Morrison, if you want slightly more esoteric and weird and magical influences. Warren Ellis, for all his recent troubles that have probably neutered him. He's a really good person to follow and to read because he's always interrogating the bleeding edge of technology and society and politics, but at sort of one step removed in a lot of ways. So Warren is often aware of things and ideas before the rest of us are. So he's a good person to keep an eye on. Pat Mills, probably the best comics writer who was not really part of the British invasion of the US, and so is probably a bit of a secret, but not entirely, to people outside the UK. But Charlie's War is fantastic and good inspiration for historical gaming. Slane and its kind of hanger-on, sort of neo-pagan sort of material, that's good. Basically anything he did for 2000 AD or outside of 2000 AD for British comics. Back to books. Neil Stevenson, bit bloated these days, but his earlier work is tight and definitely worth reading for the ideas. Peter F. Hamilton is great at world building and combining off-the-wall ideas with more grounded ideas. You don't ever feel lost, perhaps a little flowery in his descriptions, particularly of technology here and there, but a solid writer, again, who gets dismissed as being right-wing, I think due to his earlier cyberpunk novels, but I'm not 100%. Gibson's too obvious. Poul Anderson, Frederick Pohl, Heinlein, feels on the edge of obviousness, and again another author who gets dismissed. Don't let politics control who you read. Read who you want, read who you're interested in, take the good stuff and discard the rest. But Heinlein's a complicated character politically anyway. Susan Cooper, her Dark is Rising children's books are surprisingly dark and effective. Ignore the film. Ben Bova, harder science fiction, sort of edge. He's a good one to read for that sort of thing. The entire corpus of the new wave SF of the 60s and 70s, I would say. And all those paperback 70s and 80s science fiction short story collections. Short stories are a bit of a lost art commercially, so you have to go back and you have to read those, and that's just like a fire hose of ideas into your brain. So yeah, steal those. Again, by no means comprehensive, but there's a start. Get reading.